Hi guys, my name is Lexi Wygand and welcome to the Emotional Weight Room. In this podcast, we take a deep dive into everything social work. But in today's episode, we're going to take a dive into school social work and try to figure out what they're dealing with inside the school and outside of it. It seems like a lot of school social workers are feeling burnout at a more fast rate. And it seems like they're also feeling like their caseload size is too big or they're having some secondary traumatic stress. So I kind of wanted to figure out if there was any correlation between the three. So you guys are going to come along for the ride. We're going to do this from concept to conclusion. You will take every step with me. So whether you're a student or researcher or just generally curious in research, then this episode will be for you. So let's kick things off with our topic. I talked about it a little bit at the intro, but we're going to really focus on the relationship between caseload size, burnout, and secondary traumatic stress within school social workers. Now, I know, this is not exactly a new area of interest, but what has made this study unique is that it focuses solely on one area of social work, and that's within the schools. School social workers we see are becoming more and more prevalent for our youth of today. And their caseload sizes are increasing, and I believe that it could potentially increase the feelings of burnout and secondary traumatic stress within this population. So I really want to take a deep dive into what is going on. I want to hear from school social workers. And so before I started this, I had to do a literature review. So in the next part, we are going to be talking about past research that I found that can potentially relate to what I'm wanting to study. So when I dove into the research that I found that social workers in general were just clumped together, which was what I was expecting. And I also expected that if it was a specific subset, that it would be DCFS or mental health related, which is what I found. And a lot of these studies did have variables that I was looking for my own study. So we're going to go through what other people had found and just kind of talk about what the results were and how they were interesting. So the next study that I want to share with you is by Kim and others from 2014. And in this study, they collected survey data from 1,244 caseworkers in a public child welfare agency in a Midwestern state. And the purpose of this study was to attempt to address the gap by identifying specific regional and individual factors that influence both subjective and objective dimensions of workloads. So, what did they find within this? What was the outcome? Well, this study indicated that excessive investigation caseloads appeared to be a strong factor that predicted both workload outcomes. They also found that caseworkers tended not only to perceive a higher level of unmanageability of their workloads, but also have to work overtime. They're working multiple different cases, or blended cases, if you will, such as investigation or ongoing service cases for different cases simultaneously. They're doing this at the same time. And the findings of this can be explained by the concept of role conflict or job ambiguity. So the last study that I want to bring your guys' attention to today when I did my literature review was by Last and others from 2024, and the participants for this study were eligible if they were A, union members, B, providing direct outpatient mental health services, C, finished with graduate training, D, serving mostly Medicaid or uninsured patients, and E, working in New York or Chicago. In New York and Chicago were selected because they share very similar qualities or features that make them amendable to comparison. So what was the purpose of this study? The purpose of this study was to examine the perspectives of unionized public mental health therapists working in diverse American cities such as New York or Chicago to gain an in-depth understanding of therapists' work conditions and labor organizing efforts. So what did they find? What was the outcome of this? The outcome was that they often really were unhappy with their working conditions. They felt like they were being challenged, not being able to provide high quality level of care that they felt their patients deserved. And many of the therapists stated that they went into public mental health to help make a difference in their under-resourced patients. And they weren't able to do this with all of the obstacles in their way. They were dealing with staffing shortages, demanding workloads, low pay and expectations, clinical prioritization of the bottom line, lack of transparency, and collaborative decision making. There was not enough training or supervision for these therapists, and they described this as a challenge that really negatively impact their well-being and their patients' well-being. They described experiencing burnout, vicarious trauma, moral injury, and perceptions of delivering low quality of care, resignation, or hopelessness, and feeling like they were not offering enough time to their patients. They did describe that their unions did improve wages, their workers' voice, agency, and hope and respect. And hopefully they can keep going on that track. I really enjoyed reading this article. It gave me a better understanding of what a union can do for social workers. And I think that we need to band together and be able to offer the best quality of care that we can for our patients. So along with all this research, I feel like there's two theories that we need to take a better look at. I think it really relates to the area of interest that we are going to be looking into today. So our two theories are going to be systems theory and person and environment theory. So our systems theory is a theory of interacting processes and the way they influence each other over time to permit the continuance of some larger whole. And our person and environment theory is an understanding that an individual's behavior or challenges within the context of their various environments, including social, economical, political, familial, and cultural factors, recognize that the person and their environment interact and influence each other reciprocally. I think the person and environment theory is really applicable to what we're going to be studying because overall, what's a social worker without their environment? We can do everything we can, but if our environment, as we've seen from the research, if the environment is not good, it provides lower quality of care. And we feed off what's around us. So if we're surrounded by negativity or by just poor management, then that can really affect how a social worker is able to do their job. So with all of this in mind, I came up with a research question. My research question was, what is the relationship between caseload, burnout, and secondary traumatic stress within school social workers? And with this research question, I came up with 3 hypotheses, which were there will be a positive relationship between caseload and burnout, there will be a positive relationship between secondary traumatic stress and caseload, and there will be a positive relationship between secondary traumatic stress and burnout. So by the end of this, we will know if our hypotheses were correct, and I can't wait to find out. Okay, so next we're going to move into my research design. What did I do to conduct this study? So for this study, it was a quantitative cross-sectional correlation online survey research study. For our sampling, we did a non-probability snowball sample. So that means people were able to send it out, share it, after I had put it out there. So I put it on multiple different Facebook pages and it was public so people could post it on their profile. They could post it in other Facebook groups that they're in. And I also had it sent out through my university and I sent it through email to other social workers that I know. And so next we're going to move on to our variables. Our independent variable was caseload size, and our dependent variables were measured by 2 different measuring tools. So our secondary traumatic stress scale from 2004, which measured intrusion, avoidance, and arousal symptoms associated with indirect exposure to traumatic events within one's professional relationship with traumatized clients. And our second one would be the Oldenburg Burnout Inventory from 1998, which measured by exhaustion and disengagement from work. And for this data that I received from this survey, it was analyzed by the IBM SPSS software. So what did I find while doing this study? I was very interested with what I found. So we're going to look through these tables together so that I can give you guys a better understanding of how to look through data and how to actually read it. So for our demographics, mostly people who filled it out were female. So we had 80.5% of our participants were female, 14.9 male, and 4.6 non-binary. For our race, it was predominantly white. We had 62.5% of our participants white, 20.5 Hispanic, and 11.4 were Asian, 5.7 were African American. So we also did include school types into this. So for our school types, we did general education, which was 61.1% of our participants, special education, 31.1%, and alternative, 7.8%. So that's how you read your demographics. Next, we're going to move into our reliability scale. So how reliable was this survey that we sent out? How reliable was the information received? So we actually had good to excellent range in both of our scales, which is amazing. It means that all of our findings were reliable. So next, we're going to move into our correlation table. So table number 3. And interestingly enough, caseload was not correlated at all with burnout or secondary traumatic stress. That was not what I was expecting when reading this. But we did find out that burnout and secondary traumatic stress were correlated. The correlation was significant at the 0.05 level. So that's what you're looking at here. Caseload size did not have any correlation, but burnout and secondary traumatic stress did. Interesting. Okay, so now let's have a discussion about everything that we found so far. So we just went over the tables. So now we're going to dive into what does that all mean? I would love to hear from you guys what your thoughts and your opinions are on everything we found. But for me, to say I was shocked was an understatement. I really thought that caseload sizes would be an indicator for burnout and secondary traumatic stress. Social workers, their caseloads just keep increasing and increasing and increasing. More children are needing the help of social workers in school. They're not able to self-regulate. They're not able to do social skills. They struggle. They have been struggling. And as social workers, when we look at the correlation between burnout and secondary traumatic stress, it's kind of frightening because as social workers, we're always told to practice self-care. How are we able to practice self-care though? We're going home. We're burnt out from our days. We're dealing with the stress of our clients, our students. How are we supposed to do self-care? I really would like your guys' opinions on this because I know that I handle stress very poorly. And from this, many other social workers are also facing the same thing. So what's going to be put in place to help social workers deal with their stress? I don't know what the answer is, but there needs to be something put in place because there's severe implications that could come along with secondary traumatic stress and burnout. And if we're not able to change how things are done, we are just going to keep rising and we're going to keep losing people because they can't handle everything that's going on. And we need to be able to have that safe space and be able to decompress, but we're not able to when we're not able to disengage from work. And that's a really hard thing that a lot of social workers struggle with because we want to help everybody that comes across our path. We want to be a positive influence in somebody's life, but that can be hard when we're doing our job almost mechanically. And I feel like within the school setting, there needs to be stricter guidelines on what a caseload size can be so that social workers are able to better handle their stress. Because I know it says that caseload size was not an indicator, but If we look at it from an outsider's point of view, if your caseload size is, say, 50 students for special ed, if our caseload size is 50 students for special ed, which is the maximum that you can have for special ed, you are seeing those students, each student, at least once a month. So there's only 30 days in a month. You have 50 students. You have IEPs. You have other duties around the school. You're probably on a crisis team dealing with crises all day from different students that may not be on your caseload. How are we going to give our social workers the time to sit down and digest everything that just happened and be able to deal with the stress and the things that they are feeling? I really wish I could give everyone an answer on how to do this, but I think it needs to come from a higher level. There needs to be stricter restrictions on caseload sizes so that people are able to help themselves when they are dealing with burnout and secondary traumatic stress. And I mean, we already have a shortage of social workers. How much worse is this going to get if we don't do anything about it? And maybe we need to look more into safeguards. Like, there has to be different safeguards that we can put in place to keep these rates down and to not see burnout keep rising, and figure out something to do to help our social workers. A lot of teachers rely heavily on social workers, especially in special education. And that's totally fine. But social workers also need to be able to take care of themselves, learn how to handle their stress. And I know that's easier said than done. Trust me, I know, because I struggle to deal with stress. I deal with it very poorly. And I'm still learning. And I know it's a hard thing to disengage from work or completely put it out of your mind as soon as you get in the car to go home. But I'm at a loss. I don't know what we need to do for social workers to help them not feel like this. And there needs to be some reform, and we need to have a conversation. Because if we keep going at this rate, there will be no social workers left for the schools. Not at this rate that we're going. So on another note, there was some limitations to this case, or to this research study, as there are in most research studies. And the limitation was caseload size may have been skewed a little bit due to an oversight on my part of not explaining exactly what I was looking for when it came to caseloads. I just put it in generalized terms, and I should have been more specific of what I was looking for. So if I were to explore this further and do it on a bigger scale, I would definitely change that and put exactly what I'm looking for into the survey. But I'm hoping that this will give everyone a little clarity on what school social workers are actually going through, and I hope that there is some change to come out of this so that social workers are able to stay in the field longer and not feel the effects of everything going on around them, that they're able to do their job and make a indent in somebody's life, and they feel good when they leave work. They're not feeling exhausted, and they're not feeling the stress of everything else going on. So everyone, that wraps up today's episode of the Emotional Weight Room. I hope this really gave you a clearer picture of just not my findings, but the research process itself. I know that it can be very tedious and there's a lot of parts that go into research, but it does give you a way better understanding on what's going on around you. And I hope that you're able to gain some knowledge and hopefully maybe try and make some reform where you are, because school social workers are important. Our students need them. They need the social skills. They need the emotional regulation help. And I really hope that this gives you a clearer picture of that. And so for the tables, I will be linking them down in the description. And if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend. And I would also love your input on what we found today. What are your feelings? So until next time, stay curious and sleep well.